and precise and clear ExxonMobil global outlook for 2050.
Thank you.
Looked at it from an Indian point of view, I would venture to suggest, even at the risk of being corrected, that energy, the growth in demand, which is widely expected that India will provide 25% of the growth in demand over the next 2 decades, the availability of energy, and the need to ensure that that availability combined with affordability is firmly anchored in the green transition. I think that is the challenge. I can easily relate to the optimism that clearly comes through your global outlook. I had expected that optimistic streak, so I'm not surprised. You have also projected that emissions are projected to decline. I'm a little more concerned there. Okay. Not about the Indian part of the global equation. We are one of the few countries that has met our Paris commitments.
Mm-hmm. That's very true.
And knowing the man that I work for, the ultimate boss, his commitment to green, sustainable energy risks, whether it comes through the biofuels, about which you said nice things, or about the venture into the fuel of the future, green hydrogen, which perhaps is not as widely known, or about the solar and wind, which is relatively well known. But I think no matter which way you look at it, the Indian commitment to the green transition is complete, it is total, and we will do it in spite of whatever is said here and there. Let me first of all endorse something that you have very clearly brought out. Whether it is your outlook up to 2050, Chris, or you take the IEA or the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, which I had something to do with when I was posted in Geneva. I was there when we had an election. I'm talking about the year of the Lord, 2002. Okay. And I followed the IPCC from there. I've watched its studies. There are 2 or 3 things which stand out. And I wanted to share those with you, and I would love your comments even as we talk. Okay. One is that when the narrative for green, sustainable energy started, there were a lot of do-gooders out there in the world, well-meaning people who wanted, and perhaps they so desired, the shift to green energy from the traditional fossil fuels to be more pronounced and dramatic. I have no quarrel with that. What I have a quarrel with is that there was a little lack of understanding. If you take any facility, and I'm new to this portfolio, I've been around only 3 years. If you take any existing portfolio anywhere in the world and you strike oil, you have a period after which there is an annual decline which takes place unless there is investment in that. And I think most studies now show that unless you put fresh investment into it, the existing facility will
go away. Yes.
So if you were to succumb to the powers of persuasion of the do-gooders, and they're all my friends, I used to belong to that world also in the United Nations, then you could have a situation that if the energy transition doesn't take place at a calibrated, accelerated way, you could have a major energy crisis. And I'll come to that in passing later. That's my first concern. And I think your study brings that out, that look, whatever else you're doing, be clear that your anchoring in fossil fuel could be as long as till 2050. All right. I like to sleep well at night and say, hopefully we can do it before 2050, but you should be prepared, and especially in a country like India, which is a large country, 1.4 billion people, rate of growth of energy in demand is 3 times the global average.
Yes.
You have a population which is witnessing economic growth at 7%, quite apart from whether you accept those analyses or not. I think one of your colleagues said that by 2027, India will be the 3rd largest economy if the IMF has read it correctly. But not 27, 28, whatever. Now, a $4 trillion economy, you talked about per capita income going up from, I think, $2 trillion in 2014 to $4 trillion now. But what worries me when you're talking about a global outlook, Chris, is that large parts of the world, the developing world, which are without clean energy at all. And I come to one part of that imbalance, if I may be allowed to call it. Today in India, quite apart from political points which are made by motivated commentators, supplying clean cooking gas at an affordable price is something I think we have a reasonable degree of, with all humility, where we can draw some satisfaction. We had 140 million connections of cylinder gas, LPG, made from crude in a refinery in 2014. Chris, we took that up. In 2014, 140 million. We've taken that up to 330 million. Now,
That's amazing.
330 million, Chris, is 330 million households.
Yeah.
So if an average household has 4 members in a family, you're close to covering the entire population. But more than that, the good news is we're also going very fast on the LPG provision through a pipeline. We had 14,400 line kilometers in 2014. We have to take that up to 33,000 plus line kilometers in 2030. We have already at 22,000 plus line kilometers. Now, once we do that, we are supplying cooking gas to households at 25-30% cheaper than this. But what is the rate at which we are supplying? That's the amazing thing.
Yeah.
We have a scheme for beneficiaries, especially for people who are in the below poverty line or economically weaker section. I think we have 9 criteria or so, if not more. And just about anybody who fills those criteria qualifies. Under that scheme, we have covered about 100 million people, and mostly rural households where the propensity to burn firewood and charcoal is higher than in an urban area, where the availability was not around. We supply typically one family's requirement of clean cooking gas under that scheme of beneficiaries for as little as 5 or 6 cents a day. Is that correct? And if you are a non-beneficiary, it's also only about 14 cents a day or 17 cents a day, depending on what the cost of transportation, etc. is. Now, to me, that is a very major achievement in terms of meeting the energy challenge.
That's amazing.
Because if you have, now, I give you an example. I was hosting an event during the India Energies Week. By the way, I want to invite you for that in Delhi in February, because you'll get an opportunity to literally be with young startups, students in the IITs, who would be fascinated by this kind of study, and who will also in turn contribute
to our learning. Yeah.
No, well, your learning, but to the common challenges, yeah. And we started this 2 years ago. This is going to be the 3rd edition. There's going to be a permanent platform in Goa, where the ONGC has 240 acres, and it'll be one of the best established conference tourism sites, tourism and conference sites. This year we're doing it at a new facility in Delhi because that facility is coming up. The kind of things that are happening here must be seen in contrast, and I'm not trying to belabor a point, but there are large parts of the world which in your beautiful presentation you say are below the minimum line, which don't have any access to cooking this thing.
Right.
So an entrepreneur in Ahmedabad, in Gujarat, actually takes the initiative of going and selling 1 million or 10 million? 1 million cooktops to Kenya, and he imports ethanol from Kenya to use as a cooking medium there. I mean, that is what the newly formed Global Biofuels Alliance can think of. Even it has now 27 countries, and it can look at standards for sustainable aviation fuel, which again is something that I would like your outlook to look at. Because if the European Union goes and mandates a 5% thing, which I think see coming, then you will require a lot of sustainable aviation fuel, and that better be sustainable. Because as aviation is growing, you're going to get more and more of that problem with 2 degrees, etc. But coming back to this subject which we are discussing, I am a little surprised that sometimes the work that we do goes a little unnoticed. We have to, by virtue of the fact that we will continue to be reliant on traditional energy for some time, we have no choice but to step up our E&P, our exploration and production. Now, 2 or 3 things which we've done, I think, which merit notice, is that the Prime Minister freed 1 million square kilometers out of our 3.5 million square kilometers sedimentary basin, which was a no-go area, and it's been cleared for E&P. Secondly, we've changed our mindset on this whole E&P question. Earlier, it was a bit of an inward-looking regulatory, you come and invest. If you find the oil, then I will assert my sovereign claim, and the rest is history. Everybody will go away. Today, we are much more in an inviting mode. If you don't want to spend anything, come. We will incentivize that. I was in Brazil recently, and we've done some very nice tie-ups with them to get their assistance in, because they have an undisputed expertise, Petrobras I'm talking about, in offshore deep water, and said, come and do your seismic. You don't need to make a commitment. We say the same thing to everyone else. You don't need to make a commitment. Come. If you find we make a find, then you'll have the first chance of, refusal, and it's a win-win for all parties. But, when we announced the 9th round of OALP, some of my friends sitting here, I don't want to name them, they're used to putting out what I call not this thing, but I shouldn't use adjectives, but they said, oh, no response received. I just want to share with them that an area of 136,596 square kilometers was offered for 28 blocks in 8 sedimentary basins. 136,596 square kilometers in 28 blocks in 8 sedimentary basins, which is the largest area offered so far in any bid round under the OALP scheme. Out of the total 28 blocks on offer, 13 blocks with an area of 51,405 square kilometers, that's a 38%, fall in which was earlier the no-go area. Earlier that was not open for people prospecting. Now I'm just saying for my friends from the distinguished Fourth Estate, members of the Fourth Estate who I want them to take careful notes, and if they like, correct their stories, or I'll issue a press release with these figures out to make your job easier. Our biggest national oil company has joined hands with private companies to submit a consortium bid, a first in OALP. I've been saying that all along. The thing is in Indian waters, it's Indian, but we invite all the companies in the world to come in. Some of them are hesitant because they say, well, it's a lot of investment. I said, come, team up with our guys, and I'm even going a step further. Come and see, we'll find different ways of getting you to participate. A total of 60 bids was received for these 28 blocks. 24 are from PSUs meaning the public sector undertakings, and 35 are from the private companies. And one public-private consortium bid shows much larger participation by the private sector, both here and abroad. The bids received per block is 2.4 against 1.3 bids per block received during the last round, which is OALP 8. The point I'm making is a very clear expression of interest, and this is only OALP 9. When you see OALP 10, we will go even further. The point I'm making is we are acutely conscious as we make the transition, we still have to make sure that we don't receive a situation that if our green transition is short there, we still have domestic this thing. Our refining capacity has gone up from about 252 million metric tons per annum. We have plans in place for 300 million metric tons per annum, but going on to, we have to see whether it's 400 or 450. Chris, on green transition, biofuels is a good story, but I want to fast forward. We had a target of 20% blending for 2030. We brought that forward from 2030 to 2025. And the good news is we are already applying our minds, including through the press and commentators, that let's start applying our minds to what we are going to do post-2025. The government has to do something, the private sector, the OMCs, everyone involved. The story which is not very well known is the green hydrogen story. Because the targets which have been set were set in a very conservative manner in an area where people, first when there is something is talked about in mission mode, everybody comes in. Then they come and discover that, there may be too much in this, we're not. So that some people clear out. But the guys who remain are the serious guys. I can tell you that just about every known, established manufacturer of electrolyzers in the world is here today. Why? Because India offers a classic recipe for success of green hydrogen, which is essentially local demand, local production, and local consumption. The gas does not lend itself to transportation. People will make green ammonia, do that, do other things, other parts. But again, I don't wish to be critical. I think green hydrogen will succeed in countries like the United States and India because of the factors I mentioned. It could succeed elsewhere. But, to transport even the green ammonia or the gas in large tracts which are sparsely populated does not lend itself for economic success or viability. Going forward from here, where do I see this? Is there any part of your analysis that I could be uncomfortable with? Answer is no. I could agree with most of it. I think some of the India tailoring to take into account, you already have the biofuels success story. One of the points I should make is we have demonstrated our capacity to bring down the cost per unit of solar dramatically, from 25 cents to 3 cents a megawatt. That plus the electrolyzers, plus the fact that we are going forward on the green hydrogen plan in a way, I think going forward, the biofuels, I am not a soothsayer. When I was ambassador to to Brazil, the government of the day at that point of time wanted a 5% blend in 10 of our states and union territories, and we couldn't do it. Today, we have the ability, we have the ecosystem. I have my friends sitting here who are making ethanol from second generation from agricultural waste. They're also already talking about third generation from industrial gases, from bamboo. I think that research and that ecosystem which places a premium, and much of it is domestic. I think the 2G plants are domestic. The 3G one, I think, has a collaboration with an American company, where a fantastic amount of work is being done on this. And my last conversations in Washington were very reassuring with Secretary Grenhall. But going forward from here, I see our E&P emphasis more pronounced and more focused, yielding results. We will be more inviting to others. Our emphasis on gas, and I'm only mentioning this as possible things which could go into the India annotation of the global outlook. I think we are committed to the energy mix moving from 6% to 15%. I must confess, when I became minister and I saw that 6% going to 15% target, I was a little worried. Because, I became minister around the time when we went into the COVID period. So I was worried. But today, I don't know, we are at 8 plus, etc. I think getting to 12, 13, 15 is not going to be difficult. It means hundreds of billions of dollars of investment. But I'm already talking to people all the time for more LNG supply, for more LNG domestic production. Our import dependence, I'm quite happy your outlook doesn't mention it, but with the economy firing on all 6 cylinders, we are still import dependent for crude oil at an astronomically high figure. We want to bring it down, but the idea of bringing it down is not to this thing. You must go on supplying energy to the consumer. But on gas, I'm fine, very good. Even though we increase our production every year by 18%, but we are still about 45-50% import dependent. So that is going to be the India story as I go along. I don't want to take more time than I had intended or you had wanted to give me. I think I read somewhere technology. No, first government policy. Governments have to be committed.
Yep.
Governments have to come out, all things being equal, after supply is there and affordability, to make that green transition. I think this government is committed to that. Technology, and finally the large marketplace. I think these 3 together, and all I can say is we value our cooperation with you, with ExxonMobil, not only because of the global outlook, but also in the overall evolution of the India energy story, which is as much for India, for our journey up to 2047 as to be characterized as a developed country. But I also think that Indian policies, by virtue of the size of the Indian consumer, also have a global stabilizing influence and a positive influence, where I think the work we are doing in India is replicable on a larger scale for the global south.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
Thank you, Minister Puri, for your remarks, which I'm learning in my few engagements since I moved to India are always insightful, but also very personable as well in how you engage with members of the community. We will now have a Q&A session, question and answer session with Mr. Birdsall. If you would like to ask a question, we have ushers that are out there with microphones. We ask you to ask for one of those microphones and speak into it so all can hear the question. And we will proceed for a period of about 10 minutes of question and answer before we close.
Well, while we wait for questions, I did want to thank you for your comments. And one important thing you mentioned that I failed to mention in my talking points is, I mentioned that more is needed for the world to achieve a 2°C pathway. What I didn't mention is that in our modeling work, which is independent from what the government of India says, but our modeling work does show that India is well on track to not only meet the nationally determined contribution but could even exceed it. And it's just a testament to the progress that's being made here in India.
Thank you very much. No, I appreciate that. There are two things I want to tell you about our overall plans. I mean, I don't want to sound too presumptuous. I'm Minister for Petroleum and Natural Gas, but that also includes some aspects, if not all aspects, of energy transition. So I think clean energy is one. One is all our policies are out there in the open. There's nothing that we do which is not either announced. For instance, let me just tell you that even when it comes to ENP, I went to the cabinet for approval to modify our legislation, and those modifications or tweaks in our legislation are all based on a consultative process with our partners and whatever they wanted. So I got the cabinet approval for that, and after that I've already filed we've submitted draft legislation, which because of the delay in getting that next session